In this video, I'm going to tell you about how to make kill team lists that really can scratch your hobby itch. Now, I've been talking about kill team, it seems like for a while now, and it's just about upon us, and I've been going through the rules, going through the book, and I've been building lists, and I've been really enjoying it. I'm not normally a Listhammer kind of gamer. I'm normally more of a hobby hero, a pro hobby hero, and but it's one of those situations where I'm just kind of enthralled in making interesting lists and thinking about what's kind of going on within that small kill team. I'll admit, when I first started going through the book, and there are these charts for every section, for every different type of army, for Imperial Guard, for Necrons, for Orcs. There's this little section at the beginning of each of those that kind of has some fluff and explains the army and all that kind of stuff, but then it has a bunch of charts that you can roll on randomly to name your people. And I thought, well, okay, well, I mean, that's nice that they gave you that if you want to go that direction. And then there's all kinds of little charts that'll tell you about like what their backstory is, what their motivations are. And I thought, do you get like a +1 to something if I pick the right motivation, or are there bonuses in the game rules? Because I wasn't thinking story still. I was really more thinking about like the game. Even though I'm not a really competitive player, I was thinking about the game and how you play it and win and all that kind of stuff. And all this kind of background stuff really started making me think about the actual hobby involved in making your own kill team. Because of the different types of specialists, you want to have a leader, and then depending on where you go from there, you almost always want to have a leader, but then you definitely probably want to have maybe gunner. I like gunner. Sniper sometimes is good. Medic, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of different ones of the different specialists, and you can get a lot of different skills. And I've found, even though I'm not necessarily super strategically minded, I'm looking at the different skills that they have and trying to figure out synergies, for lack of a better word, of how like this one can work really well with this one. If these two guys stay together, usually in the group, then they'll kind of help overlapping, force multipliers and all kinds of stuff that you generally hear more on the more strategic YouTube channels, whereas usually I'm telling you how to paint and think about gaming and dumb junk like that. But all those rules also kind of come back around to the story behind your little ragtag group of doofuses, running around on the board and shooting other doofuses that are usually generally controlled by your friends, unless you play by yourself, no judgment. But so because of all of this, I've been looking at the lists and the way that you build them, and I've been thinking both a little strategically minded, I will admit, and I'm not sure that I'm right, but I think that I'm thinking strategically minded, but I'm also thinking about what kind of cool stuff I can build and how I can kind of model them. I have never, ever owned any Death Watch models, but years ago there was a box that came out that had a kill team in it, and it was just called Kill Team, and that's a Death Watch thing, and it was 5 models, and you could build them a zillion different ways. They're all normal Space Marines. There was a bigger kit that also came with like a motorcycle and a couple of Terminators, maybe, I think, but this was the smaller 5-man kit, and in it you have a lot of different options. So I started looking at the list and looking at the cool things inside there, taking into consideration how I wanted to model it. They all look quite alike, the Death Watch. They're all pretty much painted black. They all have their own chapter shoulder pad over here, and then the Death Watch one over here. So there's not a lot of variation there. They all have those kind of like pouches and extra missiles or whatever all over their chests. So there's not a lot of variation there as well. But, their weapons, that's very different, and the way you pose them and all that kind of stuff, and the way you kind of think about what you're going to be doing for the basing and all that stuff. So I sat down and started working on a list based off of what came in that box and kind of what I wanted to do with my overall force, whether for good or for ill. So I'm starting off with a Watch Sergeant. In the Death Watch, there's really only one unit that's available, and it's called the Veteran. But within the Veteran, there are 4 different versions. There's the Watch Sergeant, the Black Shield, the regular Veteran, and the Veteran Gunner, if just from memory. So I've got a Watch Sergeant, and he's got the Xenophase Blade, which is basically a Necron weapon that he stole from a dead Necron, which I think is just right off the bat I don't care how well it works. It's just kind of badass, frankly. So the fact that it's even in there in the kit and that you can use it, pretty sweet. So he's got a Xenophase blade and a combi plasma. Evidently, and I'm, again, not a Deathwatch player generally, but one of the benefits of being able to play, Kill Team now is that I can become a limited Deathwatch player. They're all about combi weapons, because there's a lot of combi weapons in that box set. So watched Sergeant with Xenophase blade and combi plasma. I've always been a fan of plasma. I love the sort of we'll see how it goes that plasma does. In the old days, plasma was always just like a crapshoot. Now you can just not overcharge it, and then you won't blow your arms off, which is. I very frequently say go big or go home as far as plasma is concerned, but sometimes you do want to play a little safe. So the fact that I have the ability to combi plasma, and the thing that's cool too is that you can fire both the bolter and the plasma gun at the same time, and then you just get a -1 to each of those shots. But that's a thing that's in Kill Team, and I don't know that that's a normal Deathwatch thing. You guys in the comments who know more about Deathwatch, let me know below. I don't have the Deathwatch Codex, a normal book at home, but if that's the case, then okay, fine. But if it's not the case, that's a super cool kind of Kill Team specific thing. Then I've got a veteran with Stalker Pattern Bolter and Power Sword. The Stalker Pattern Bolter, if I remember correctly, shoots a little bit further. And the thing that's really interesting, too, about the Deathwatch is that they have the ability to switch different types of ammo pretty much almost at will. And that's a lot of fun, too. When you're doing that, you can kind of... it reminds me, frankly, of Judge Dredd, who can just it's like voice commands to his Peacemaker, and then it switches to a different type of... weapon like smoke rounds or high X or armor piercing or whatever. I've always been a big Judge Dredd fan, and the fact that basically now you can do that with your bolter if your Deathwatch is yeah. Third guy, veteran with combi plasma and power sword. So we've got a combi plasma again, like the Sergeant has, and again a power sword. There's a lot of nice looking power swords in there. That Xenophase blade that the Sergeant is carrying is the sweetest looking weapon in there as far as melee weapons in my opinion, but the power swords are a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to being able to paint up the power swords. I learned some things from our man Sam Lenz at Adepticon at one of his classes back in March, and maybe I'll put some of that to the test, or maybe I'll just take the quick way and the way that I'm relatively good at, and airbrush the power swords. We'll see. But either way, power swords with the armor piercing, the AP or whatever, I want to go that way because I want a mixture of range guys, but also guys who can get into a scrap with some weapons. And then speaking of range guys, my last two guys in my 5-man kill team for Deathwatch, I've got a gunner with the Deathwatch frag cannon, which looks super badass, and then I've got a gunner with the Infernus heavy bolter, which also looks super cool and does a lot of neat things. Those two guys, I'm going to probably keep them a little closer to each other most of the time. The trick is that I want one of them to be a gunner specialist, and I haven't decided which one yet. And then the other one, because I can't have two gunner specialists, is going to have something else, and I haven't quite figured out yet what I'm going to do with that second one. I'm thinking maybe Zealot, but, well, I'm not sure. I got to go back and look through the book. This is all the really interesting stuff, in my opinion, that you get to do when it's time to sit down and work on a kill team. I'm not against working on regular 40K lists. Mathhammer, Listhammer, all those different types of things are very interesting to a lot of people. To me, I generally like to build a big 40K list based off of what I think looks cool, what I think will work together nicely, again, visually in a giant detachment or whatever. But more often than not, it's not ideal for strategic force. But in this game, because I can do that same thing, but with just 5, maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 guys, I feel like I can take a few more risks, because when you build an entire 2,000 point list of Space Marines or well, not Eldar, I wouldn't build Eldar, but other people do, Tau or whatever. When you get done with that, if you find out you built it wrong and you constantly get stomped at every chance, then you feel bad and it kind of puts you down. In this, when you're just writing yourself up a list here of different things, and you've got 5 guys, and maybe it doesn't work out, you can swap a couple of people in, a couple of people out. It doesn't take you that long to redo or to add to or to modify. And it's just, I think it's going to be a really great thing for people who are interested in playing, but are also interested in putting in the hobby and the modeling time. Now, one thing that Games Workshop has been suggesting over and over again when talking about Kill Team is that you should model your specialists so that they're very easy to spot and go, oh, well, that's obviously the medic because he's, I don't know, wearing a gown. I'm not, or in the face mask, probably not. But, some people will, especially in the old Kill Team back in the day, people would model very specific, figures so that this is obviously your leader, this is obviously your gunner, this is obviously your combat specialist. And I'm definitely going to do that with the leader, obviously. Pretty much every situation, you'll be able to spot the leader very, if it's any kind of Space Marine, generally walking around with no helmet, which I don't get, but it's a thing. But for the other ones, I don't know, I don't know that I want to go full out and just like completely at a glance make it so that they look that way, because a couple different reasons. One is if at some point I've decided I want to change this person from a medic to a fighter or one of the other classes, if I've completely painted them to go that direction, it's a little bit tougher to go in the other without having to basically either build another new model, which is not that big of a deal, obviously. But I don't know. I kind of want to put some sort of markings on their bases so that I can always tell who's who very easily. But I don't necessarily have to go, and I don't want to say overboard, but I don't have to go completely into the idea of making them look very, very specific to their specialist role. So I'm going to kind of play that by ear. These Deathwatch guys are the first ones that I've built and modeled, and you can't see them yet because they're not done. They've just been primed. But they're built. Anyway, I can't show them off to you yet, and these are the first ones I'm going to do it with, so I'm not going to be getting too fancy. Right after these guys is Plague Marines, and Plague Marines always look all crazy and different anyway, so that's not a very big problem. When I get into maybe my Space Marines, which is a mixture of Primaris and Reavers, and I'm not sure if I'm adding in a Scout Sniper yet or not, but when I get into that list, maybe I'll do some more customizing. They're built, but I might, they're not primed yet, so I might do some more customizing from there. The thing that I find awesome about all of this is the fact that because of the new Kill Team coming out very soon, or depending on when you've seen this, it's already out, I can really get focused, and that's what the whole magic of a skirmish game is I can get very focused on a specific small group, and I can think about them and do a lot and put a lot of effort and time into backstory. And, I didn't give you any names for these guys yet that I've just explained, my Deathwatch, because I haven't come up with them yet, but I will. Strangely enough, I will. I did a video years ago about personalizing your models, your miniatures. Pachow. Watch that. I mean, the sound's not great and the lighting's not great and all that stuff, but it talks about kind of taking that extra step more often than not after they've done something amazing in battle and giving them a bonus. But you can also do that with these types of models if you're so inclined. I am, with this first Kill Team, taking very kind of trepidatious steps into super customizing these models, but I'll let you know how it goes as we kind of go along on this ride.